Hey everybody, this is Khara Crossway Brindle. Welcome back to another video. Oh my gosh, I've got some powerhouse leaders in here. Yay! You now probably know all these faces. They've all been on the channel before, talking about different topics. The topic today, before I have them introduce themselves, we're here to talk about going from group practice back to solo practice. It's happening. A lot of us have a reason why. You're going to hear from three other amazing mental health leaders as to why they chose to go back to solo. But first, let's have them introduce themselves. Who wants to say hi first to our audience?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I'm Cathy Wilson, and my practice is called Life Paths Counseling Center, and changed from a group practice to a solo practice, and I'm keeping the name Life Paths.
That is your brand. Makes sense. Absolutely. Thanks, Kathy, for being here. Others?
I'm Ashley. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
Ashley. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm the owner of Enso Counseling, and I'm also in the process of going from group back down to solo. I'm still in the process though. So
Yes, well, we're definitely going to hear what it's feeling like in the moment. Everyone's at a different stage on this video. All four of us viewers are going from group to solo or have already done it or in the process. You're going to hear everyone's story today. Alex, last but not least.
Yes, my name is Alex Castro Croy, and I went from owning two agencies, life recovery centers, to solo practice, Transcending Consulting Group. And we'll be talking, and I'm officially done, closed both practices, got rid of all the furniture, everything. So I'm super excited to start and that closed August 31st was our closing date that I closed both agencies. So yeah.
Yeah. So as we're filming this mid-December, lots to kind of think about as to how that transition is feeling now, right, versus August.
Yes.
But yeah, so let's start with the big question for all three of you, which is what spurred the decision to go from group to solo, if you're willing to talk about your story. Anyone willing to go first?
burnout. I shouldn't laugh. But I mean, I really kept taking on more and more and more. And it seemed like the natural progression of things, right? You have a wait list. Okay, I'll take someone on. Okay, I'll take someone else on. Okay, I'll take someone else on. I'll hire a biller. And I had all these other projects going on as well, building trainings, starting a doctorate program. And so eventually I hit a point where I was like, something has to give. And this part of my career has to be it. I also have felt a lot more stress regarding my supervision practice than I ever thought I would. It became a lot of like case management, crisis work with the supervisees. And that ended up becoming like 24/7, 365. And so that was also a big piece of it for me is like, how do I really clear my plate down to a manageable, more like 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 schedule.
Mm-hmm. So relatable, I think, to people who are going to watch this video of like, yep, check, 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 burnout, too much going on, too much on the plate. Absolutely. How about Kathy? You next. I'm just going to call on you guys because they'll make it a little easier.
Okay, okay. I would have to echo a lot of what Ashley just said. When you said burnout, that one word captures so much of what was happening for me when I made the decision to do this. And the stress of all the details. And then for me, there was also this drive towards these creative endeavors that I had and have and had both. And I wasn't getting time for those because there was so much to the group. And I have loved running the group, but I was getting so tired and then missing out. That's not the greatest way to put that, but really wanting to dive in with those creative endeavors. And I was holding myself back because of the responsibilities of the group, and then realizing I don't have to keep doing this was fabulous. So that's
Yeah, and all four of us are private practice owners, which is, I think, important context to what Kathy just shared of like, we get to make these decisions, but maybe it also feels kind of like an aha moment when we finally go, oh, I'm in control of my schedule. I'm in control of that 9 to 5, 8 to 4 creative projects in the schedule. So I just want to name that for other viewers. Alex, what about you?
For me, it was, I mean, echo everything everybody was saying. Busy. I was always busy. Having two agencies, having over 15 staff, counselors, being I was a dual diagnosis agency, so we had criminal involved clients, adolescents, Department of Human Services. There were just so many hands in the pot, so many staffing, case managers, um, and we work with both bilingual populations, so Spanish and English. It got to the point where my passion kind of I was losing it because I was so busy. I was on vacation, checking messages, putting out fires, and finally my husband's health started deteriorating, and so I pretty much like the interview that you did. It's like I don't I when I am I don't want to hate the field and I don't want to sacrifice things within my marriage. And so I decided it's time. It's just time. After 8.5 years, almost 9 years, I decided to pull the plug. And
Yeah.
it was I had already been thinking about it. I had a because I had a nonprofit, for profit, and consulting. And so I don't know, it just kind of happened. And I'm like, when I look back, it's like, how was I doing this? I don't know how was I doing this with 15 staff. Yeah, it was a lot. And finally I was at a ropes course in Oregon, and it was there that I realized I just need to stop pushing myself to do things. I don't need to prove anything to anyone, and I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah, so for viewers who don't know Alex's story, he's referencing, I just interviewed him for our series, The Human and the Helper, which Kathy is also a part of. And he talks about dislocating his shoulder on those ropes
Yes.
course and being like, I can just keep going. I can just keep pushing through and being like, what the hell? Why am I pushing through? Like, this hurts. This is hurting me.
Yes. And that's the same way that I felt with my agencies. Like, I'm done. This is hurting me, and I'm not feeling satisfaction. And I wanted to do more soul work that was more aligned with what I wanted, rather than just uh criminal justice involved. Don't get me wrong, I love that population. It's just it wasn't aligning with me anymore. So I decided to pivot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pivot's our favorite word in this channel.
Yes.
So yeah, for people who don't know my story, I am in the tail end of going from a group practice that I've had for about 8 years and moving back to solo. And it's been a process. I want to talk with all of you about like the runway that you gave your folks, because I think for people watching this going, yep, this resonates. I have burnout. I'm not feeling satisfied. I need to make a pivot. This was not an easy process for any of us. I know because I've actually talked to each of you individually. But for people who don't know, like, how many months or years did this kind of go on for you to say, like, got to the tail end, or actually for you being in the midst of it? Like, let's talk to people about what that looked like. Anyone willing to start us off?
I had been thinking about it, gosh, I'd say the summer before. I think I started really thinking about it when I had the nonprofit, just struggling with getting people on board, convincing, board members on, buying in. And it just became uh, so tedious and a task, rather than it became a passion. And I started realizing I was losing sleep. I was working odd hours. For me, I'm huge on dream. I started dreaming and having nightmares. And so I'm like,
Mhm.
why am I having dreams and nightmares? My unconscious telling things to my consciousness. I'm Jungian at heart. And so I'm analyzing my dreams, like I know what this is telling me, this is from. And so I started realizing I was dimming my light, and I wasn't shining as bright as I wanted to because I had too many hands in the pot, too many obligations. If it wasn't behavioral health administration, it was a judicial district, it was Department of Human Services, Department of Corrections, a school. It was constantly having to, and the systems don't talk with each other, and they contradict each other, and you have to know how to navigate each system. And I was like, people are people, souls are souls. Why am I doing this? I felt like it was just too much, too fast, and I just didn't have the bandwidth anymore. And so I started talking about slimming down, pivoting. That was a big thing. Pivot intention, and finally, um, I decided in one of the retreats that we were at that this is the year that I think I'm going to pivot. Either get an executive director and step away, or shut it down. And I decided to shut it down. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hearing, last year there were some thoughts percolating, and then this year it became the implementation stage to tell the team, hey, we're closing the doors. This is what's happening next. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct.
Mm-hmm. What about for the ladies? What was it like to have a runway for people saying, we're out, we're done?
Go ahead, Ashley.
So my story is a little bit different. I just transitioned from solo to group like 14 or 15 months ago. And so I realized pretty quickly, oh my gosh, I don't think I like this. And then I started doubting myself, and I was like, you have to like this. Like, this is the next level of success. And so I went through a lot of like inner turmoil and did a lot of like inner healing work, because like, what is my true self, right? Is it this person who is saying no to this next step that most people think is necessary to take to measure success? Or is it, fighting that? And so that took me a number of months to really grapple with. And I consulted with a lot of different colleagues and friends and family members across fields, really. And then once I made the decision, I gave my independent contractors 4 months. I gave like an ideal deadline, and then, kind of after back and forth, realizing, okay, I want to make sure clients have continuity of care. I felt very strongly I had to set up my independent contractors for success, whether that was like a warm handoff to another practice or facilitating them opening, their own practice with insurance contracts, which is why I'm kind of still in flux, because I gave an initial deadline, and then after considering how difficult this is, I've been a little bit more flexible about that deadline. And it's been really lovely for it to be more of a conversation between me and my other social workers, rather than like this hierarchical, like, this is ending, figure this out. And so interestingly, I'm really proud of what I built, and I'm really proud of what I'm dismantling as well.
So relatable when you're like, oh, this is the process, had to have some flexibility, because like we don't know how much time is the right amount of time. And Cathy, I know you can definitely speak to this with your story, because it's like, how much is too much versus too little? There's no right formula here for folks. So Cathy, you want to share yours?
Thanks. Yep, I do. So initially, when I first started thinking along these lines, it was more about change. What can I change in my routine, my processes, to make this more manageable? Because this was happening to me at the end of 2021. And I think that was when the good faith estimates became a requirement. And my head exploded when that happened, because I thought, here's another thing I've got to figure out how we manage this, let alone for myself, for the group. They were depending on me to put tools and forms and things like that in place. And I was overwhelmed. And then I attended a workshop by one of our colleagues that was a planning for 2022. Just a quick half a day little workshop to put some thought into what you want to make of the next year. And at some point in those 4 hours, I thought, I could actually stop. Like, I could change from group to solo. And, this good faith estimate horror that we're dealing with might be one of the last big horrors like that I have to do as a group. And so I spent several months thinking about that and looking at many aspects of the business and where my people were in the process of either finishing internship or building their own private practices, because I have all contractors as well as Ashley. And I decided, okay, we can make this a long transition up to the point when the lease is up on my office, which was in July of this past year. So July 23. And I gave my staff a little more than a year's notice. And so I care about them all, right? And so part of the reason for all that notice was, okay, you step up your effort in building your private practice and deciding what direction you're going to take things at this point. I will help you along the way. Did a lot of private practice consulting with all of them through the process. And, but it was a little too long. It was a little bit too long of a lead time because things got messy at times and we'd have to figure it out. And when do I stop giving you clients? All those decisions were a little bit difficult to navigate at times. We managed because they're fantastic. So we managed all the way, but it was probably a little too much time for them, with it generating grief for them as well as me. And some fear. It's like, I'm going to be on my own now. What's that going to look like? And, they're fairly new to the field. So it was bumpy. And yet at the same time, thank goodness, right? We cared for each other through those times. And that helped a lot. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to hear everybody's journey. For my team, I gave them 5 months notice of like July, December, like we're done before the end of the year. And just like you're hearing from everybody here in the call, it was intentional, but with some flexibility. Like I wanted it to be early December, knowing I didn't want to have to handle any of this like logistics admin stuff at the end of the year when we're all checking out for holidays or want to spend time with our families. And yet, circumstances showed up with insurance, as Ashley shared, where it's like, gosh, this is taking forever for them to get what they need. And we don't want to just like leave them in the dust. So my team is also contractors. And it was interesting. They each have their own personalities, right? And their own stuff going on. And some were like right on it. Like, I don't need 5 months. I'll get it done and off and running. And I've got one person who's like, all right, I'm almost there, but not quite. And that was partly just insurance. And so that's fascinating, right? Of like, we're trying to do this like warm handoff, this like supportive transition where I was like, I'll help you credential with Medicaid. I'll answer your questions about how to bill. Like, I'll teach you all the things that I've been doing for you for the last 8 years. But like, eventually it's still like, please leave the nest. We got this. Like, I believe in you. So just know that this is a process. And again, I don't think there's any like specific formula. Like it should be 3 months, 4 months, half a year, a year. I think really depends on what you've got going on in your practice, what else you're trying to juggle. A lot of us have been building things up as we've also transitioned our teams because we're all pretty creative and entrepreneurial. So that's a factor too of like 5 months goes pretty quickly when you're working on other projects in addition to the team being offloaded. Yes. Yes. So let's talk about the emotional part of this, because this is where I reached out to each of you individually and it's like, I'm getting hit by some grief that I didn't expect. And that's why I reached out to Cathy and then to Alex and to Ashley going, oh my gosh, you're all telling me you're doing this. I'm like wanting to cry every time I think about the transition when I first made the decision. So my decision I'd been thinking about for almost 2 years. I implemented it in July. As soon as I fully went from like contemplation to like preparation and action, think of stages of change. It was pretty quick for me to say, here's my notice. Let's give it to the team and like get the ball rolling. But once that decision was made, the grief hit. So anyone willing to tell me what their grief looked like to like normalize this for folks? Because I can't be alone in this. I know it.
I can start. For me, the grief was, I think it hit me when we started donating furniture and people started coming in to take furniture. And I started to remember when we bought this and when we got this and the feeling, the excitement. And when they started taking it, I was like, oh, I just felt this like heaviness, like, oh, it's gone. And I don't know why there was this big group table, in the men's my group room where I had the men's alchemy group, the trauma group. They took that table. I was like a little baby, like it really hit. And I was like, why am I going through this? And I stepped away because they took the table and I was like, oh my gosh, this is legit real grief. Like it's hitting. And it has nothing. It's like, it's just a stupid table. It's a big deal. But I've seen so many people cry, tell their story, process, fill out, an inventory of grief and wounding in that table, and the moments of silence on that table with the men around the table. And so it was very it was full of grief because of the processing that happened around it.
Mhm.
And then, so that was at the time of when people were taking the furniture. And I think post, when I started getting, when I notified all the insurance panel and everything, and then when I started applying for myself, my own private practice again through Medicaid, going through the whole process again, and I was like, I didn't have to go through this process the first time. Why am I going through this process again? And then just some clarifications that I had to go through. And people kept asking, wait a minute, you're already active under life recovery. Wait a minute, you're already active under life recovery. It just kept coming back. And every time I kept hearing life recovery, or what happened, or what went wrong, and the questions that people were asking, I was like, there's nothing wrong. It's just, it was time. I felt that enormous, that grief. I wouldn't say, I would say I acted like if it was subtle, but it wasn't subtle. It was like don't talk about my baby. Don't talk about my work. And
Well,
it
the judgment and like the
yeah,
assumed negativity, right? Like
exactly.
nothing went wrong. This was
Yes.
an intentional choice.
Yes, and I was like, I started feeling that defensiveness, and then that I like, oh, why do I feel this charge? And why do I feel like it's like, oh, because there's that grief there. It's that grief that it's not there. And I think the other one was just recently I went to pick up old mail at the facility, and there was some old mail that the neighbor was holding for me, and I went to pick it up, and not everything forwards. And he goes, hey, you got some old mail? And so I went up to Northland, and when I was driving towards in the parking lot, I had to gather myself like, okay,
Mhm.
this is just a facility, and it was, but it's like, no, it's grief, and you know what, I'll honor it. And I let a tear or two to shed and just allow that processing to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it really speaks to all sorts of grief, right? Like we're looking at specifically group practice to solo, but just the experience of grief in general when we go towards places that the grief is like attached to, or
Right.
furniture, all these things that symbolize the work. Like I feel like that is such a common experience that we can say like this isn't just specific to what we're talking about today. Grief shows up in all sorts of ways. And thank you, Ashley, for like speaking to like there's some judgment from
Oh
people,
yeah.
which doesn't
Oh
help
yeah.
when we're this
Yeah.
vulnerable and tender about our decision.
Right, right. There's a bit of an assumption that we did something wrong, uh,
Failed.
failed, right? And I've heard that in people's questions a few times as well. But no, there's nothing wrong. I just decided to change it drastically, but I decided to do this. And there's a lot of freedom in that, even in the face of judgment.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So, Kathy, you want to speak to your grief process as you're thinking about, obviously, judgment aside, what it was like for you outside of people's questions?
Right, right. And I can say I can echo a lot of what Alex you just said. That certain moments, something very meaningful to the practice as a group, it
Mhm.
would bring this wave of grief. But ironically, the places that I noticed it the most were at times when things I wanted to happen were happening. So care very much about my staff members. And so there was that, as I mentioned before, that helping them launch their own practice and guiding them, consulting about different aspects of that and all that came with it. But then when they started to do it, I was so sad. So that one person tells me, hey, I've got this website built and was talking about it. And I said, oh, that's great. I'm going to go look at it. And I go look at it. And it's like, oh, she's leaving. We're separating. Right.
Mhm.
And the realization came in moments like that too. And so there was some hard moments. And then when staff, one in particular, when she expressed some of that grief to me, we just cried on the phone for a while because it is hard. We know that we aren't going to lose touch with each other, but it's different. we're losing this piece. And so there was some really rough moments with that grief that you're right, Alex, you just have to let a tear or two just appear, just be there.
Not fight it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ashley, what about for you?
So I have simple practice. And when I deactivated the first person simple practice, that's when it hit me because I had been prolonging it. And then finally, after a month, I was like, well, I just paid, $69 more for no reason. And I had to hold myself accountable because, every client had been discharged at that point. And I think for me, I remember being excited to activate like my first person simple practice. And so there was like this overwhelming sense of like, oh, I was excited about this at one point, and now I've completely changed directions. And I think for me, it's grief of like who I thought I was or who I thought I would become. And again, it's been more of an identity journey for me. I'm a social worker. I want to change the world. I want to change healthcare. I want to break down barriers to care. And so, like a lot of me thought, if I don't own a group practice, I can't do that. And so I had to really find myself again, personally and professionally. And say goodbye to some big core beliefs that I had and some big dreams I had. And so for me, that's where I probably felt the most grief.
And I feel like you named this a couple times now in our video of like there's this assumption of our industry, which is you've only made it if you have a full-time, I would say full-time private pay practice or you're a group practice owner. And group practice isn't for everyone. I mean, like, we're not here to like hold it up on a pedestal or bash it, but like it's just not for everyone. And so I love that you can share your story, Ashley, of like I built it and then I was like, I don't like this. And that's okay. Like there's a lot of things about group practice ownership that are hard, they're not fun. So we can normalize that as well. I think for me, the grief showed up in finally saying out loud that I was going to do this. So I've been thinking about the group kind of phasing out. I had a baby, so that was, I think, the first pinpoint of like, I'm caring for this little infant and I don't want to care for anyone else, including a team. And I was just like, it felt like more people to care give, and I didn't have any bandwidth or capacity left in trying to care for her. And then as I did my own financial therapy work as a financial therapist here in Colorado, I then realized that to hold on to the team when it's not really serving me is scarcity. And I was like, oh, now I'm a hypocrite. So it almost like shifted it back to logic of like, I have to do this now because it doesn't serve me and it's reinforcing scarcity, which is something I'm helping other therapists combat. And so when I finally came to the decision, it's going to sound so woo on this video, but I was with a colleague in another working retreat. So Alex and I do working retreats every year. And then I have another group of mothers slash therapists that I do working retreats with. And we did a tarot reading. And she's like, you have to let go of something. What is it? And instantly I was like, the group practice. And she's like, how do you feel? And I was like, grief. And I just, cried right then. Because I knew exactly what the thing was that I needed to change to get out of my own way. But I had to like say it out loud to her and then like go back and write the letter and tell the team like, this is what's happening. And of course, I had to say it to my spouse, who, of course, is like, you've been talking about this for a while. Like, I'm surprised it took you this long. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting reflection. Like, I'm usually like, go, go, go. And he was like, this took you a while to get here. So, all that to say, the grief showed up probably the strongest when I finally articulated this is happening to him, to my colleagues, to the team themselves, and watching their reactions. And yet, so many people who watched my journey are like, we saw this coming because I was working on all these other projects that weren't in alignment with a group practice. It was serving therapists and doing things with financial therapy. So I think there is some predictability of like seeing this trajectory when we start to build things up that aren't group practice oriented. So we've talked a little bit about failure, which is huge for me as an Enneagram 3. No surprise. Ashley, I think you're also a 3, not to call you out, but like you've got something there. But like, oh, that hurts. The judgment of colleagues hurts. So for people watching, what do you want them to know about if they have someone in their life, a colleague, another professional who's making this decision, how they could do this better than judgment and shame, what would you have them do or say?
I would encourage individuals to, I use the word of soul tribe. We all have our soul tribe, people that we can be authentic, genuine, no criticism. We all find your soul tribe and lean on them. Lean on them to, Car, I have this term called V-text, vulnerable text. Hey, I send that V-text out where it's like, listen, I'm just having a moment. It's a vulnerable text and I'm having feels right now. I'm overwhelmed. I'm struggling with A, B, and C. And there's always one part of my soul tribe is like, how can we support you? I just need to talk. I just need to cry. I just need to process. Have that soul tribe there as you walk through each phase and each challenge and struggle, and just be graceful with yourself in the process, meaning that, yeah, there's going to be times where your inner saboteur is going to come in. Your inner critic's going to come in because of what the criticism that came up. And just be mindful that this is all part of the process, and this too shall pass. I mean, when you're 2 years down the road, now that I'm here in December and I'm looking back at everything that happened in July, August, I'm like, and even September, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to end? Now it's like, now I'm in December, it's like fresh up breath air, a lot more opportunities, a lot of the things that I wanted to do are coming to be. Khara knows what I'm talking about. Everything I want to do, the speaking engagements, conferences, it's happening. And I'm so joyful. Like, okay, now this is where I'm feeling joyful. So just know that this too shall pass. Lean on your soul tribe, give yourself some grace, and allow yourself to be human as you transition through your professional pivots.
Love that. What else?
I think attachment work, what was I attached to? This idea of success, this idea of kind of raising the next generation of social workers through a group practice, attached to I have to be the one to always break down barriers. I have to be part of systemic change. And cutting those have tos, those tethers has been very difficult for me, but also very freeing to release myself from that sort of pressure and those expectations. Um, I've also surrounded myself with people who love being a private practice owner, and it's just them. And, I'll say something like, oh, Medicaid didn't pay me for those 2 sessions last month. And they're like, that sucks. And I'm like, yes, it does. And just like reflections like that is so validating. And when people are like, why do you do that? And I'm like, why do I do that? And so I think through those exchanges, I've recognized like my definition of success is not everyone's definition of success. And that challenged me to redefine like, what do I want in life? And why don't I feel good enough? And when am I going to feel good enough? And so that's like the personal journey that I've been on over the last year. So that's been a big piece of it for me, is like addressing some of those unrealistic expectations I've had of myself.
Mhm. You and I are so alike. Cathy, what would you add?
But just a little bit, because several of the things that you, Alex, and you, Ashley, were just saying really resonate for me. And in particular, giving yourself some grace and taking the time to reflect on what this actually means for you. And something else that came to mind as you were talking is the idea of, I know we can't control many, many things in this life that we have, but shaping this change to fit you, right? And that has been important to me is, okay, I want to do this. And there are these creative endeavors that, I've shifted to at this point, but this change is something I created that too. I have shaped that change to be what serves me now, and would absolutely encourage that to anyone that's considering a change like this.
Yeah, how to get it to fit what you want now, what you want in your future. I think this is so timely to be filming this, knowing it's going out by the end of the year, as people are like, new year, new me kind of stuff of 2024. So, yeah, I think for anyone who's watching that has a colleague going through this process, I think I can speak to all four of us of like hold some compassion and try and try to eliminate the judgment of why they're making this pivot. There's probably a legitimate reason. You've heard from these three mental health leaders as to why, and it's leading to some really fruitful, beautiful things that are going to come out of this because they freed up their energy and their space to do something different. Group practice ownership is one of many successes in our industry, in my belief system, at least. And so I would say if you have someone in your life trying to consider going from group to solo, please hold some space and compassion for them. Please allow them to speak their truth. Please know that that's their journey and their decision, and that it doesn't really require shame or blame. There we go. To make that possible. Like we're already beating ourselves up about this because we've heard success is group practice ownership. So if you can hold some space for others, that would be probably most appreciated. At least I would speak for myself on that. So knowing that this is a video here at the end of 2023, I'm gonna put you all in the hot seat. Alex already knows his answer, but like I always like to think about what's the word for 2024. So like I'm one who likes to pick a word. I'm wondering how this is going to land for each of the three of you because you are now moving into solo practice again or have already been there. What's your word for next year and how this might show up now that you have some freedom? Anyone willing to share?
Creativity for me.
Love it.
Absolutely. I have lots of ideas of things I want to create and do, and I have a little more freedom to do that now.
Can't wait. Can't wait to see what you do. Yay. Love it. What else?
I think for me, it's taking risks, take risks. And I've been taking risks and it's been paying off. Yeah, I think take risks, meaning that if you're scared, fearless. I think that fearless and risk taking, that's the one that I chose for this year. Be fearless. Yeah, negotiating my rates. Oh my gosh. I'm putting that out there and be fearless and getting it. Like it just happened this morning. Like, yes, it landed. Yes. And they're like, I never thought I'd be getting paid for this. And I was like, yeah, so this is my rate and be fearless and convicted. And then they're like, yes, we can pay that.
And you just let it land. And you're like, okay.
Yes. Yes. And I was like, oh, there we go. That's part of being fearless. It's being able to be out there, trust yourself, take risks and be fearless. Yes.
And you're embodying that, which I love.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ashley, what about you?
I think my word for 2024 is going to be no.
Oh,
I'm clearing all this energy, I'm clearing all this time, I'm clearing all this space, and I still have so much on my plate and so much to do and so many goals, with my continued education and my practice, and some other exciting adventures. And I just have to be patient. And if there's something I want to do in the future, I have to trust that it'll be there in 2025 or 2026 and not take it on in 2024. So that's where
yeah.
I'm at.
I know you and I've read some similar books, so I can see that embodied in you right now. Like, I don't know what book you're referencing right now. Love it. So my word, and this is something I identified back in October at a retreat with Alex, is impactful for next year. And as I'm sitting here with all of you, what dawned on me is I wrote this latest book that I've written in 4 months, in a 4 month span. That was after I made the decision to let go of the group practice. And I'm seeing that as very symbolic as we're recording right now. Like, that really just poured out of me as soon as I had this space, this energy freedom to say, this is where I'm headed next. And so I am excited to see what 2024 brings for all of us as we've now said, this is a pivot, this is a different direction, this is something different, and that it's going to all work out. If Alex is representative of what it looks like, I'm very hopeful that all of us will also have that success. So very inspired. Any last thoughts for our viewers on this topic of moving from group to solo as we wrap up today?
I would just reiterate, trust yourself, honor your emotions, and believe in this pivot. Even though you're going to be presented with some challenging times, trust your heart, trust your core. It will pay off. And you'll, at the end of the day, I use that statement at the end of the day when I'm on my deathbed, I want to look back and smile and say,
Mhm.
yes, I did it rather than have regrets. So and just remember that. That's what's motivated me to keep moving forward.
Beautiful. What else?
I think community, continue to find your community continue to find the people who inspire you, understand you, validate you, don't judge you, and lean on those people when you make decisions, both big and small, and give others the same show of respect and understanding when they make their decisions as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. Kathy, what would you add?
I'm thinking about purpose and meaning. So, purpose and meaning, when I think about my group practice, it was meaningful to me because I was limited in how much I could support people and help them through the healing process. And the group allowed me to expand that and bring in other people and be a part of even more of people's healing processes. These creative endeavors where I'm headed, it's going to be, there's the purpose and meaning is similar for me. I'm still doing that, like spreading that healing further. And I think identifying that idea that the some of the purpose and meaning stays the same for me, right? And wanting social change and things like that, you're just going to be doing it in a different way, Ashley,
I love
right?
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm just thinking about how that thread is there. That's
Mhm.
still there for all of us. And I really love hearing about that in all of you.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the purpose of this video, is to just shed some light on the process. I think that would be my last thought for viewers is this is a process. And so when I first reached out to Kathy and said, I know you're going through this or are about to finish up your process, talk to me about this. We mapped out kind of from that stages of change of like, here's pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And that it takes these waves of grief and then some planning to make it possible to do the pivot, which, as I've already said in this video, I'm a fan of pivots. I've pivoted a dozen times in 12 years. Um, but just like knowing that it's going to be a process and having your own timeline and thinking about all the like logistical pieces. I can say that all three of these leaders on this video with me are a resource. Kathy was a resource for me. Alex was a resource for me. Ashley, I learned about you later and was like, oh my gosh, let's come together. It's like the fact that we're all here talking about this is because we want to be a resource for colleagues. If you're like, have some questions or you want to map out your own process, I'm pretty sure all three of these amazing professionals will be there for that. Um, so yeah, just know that it's something to think about if you're like, hey, group practice ownership's not working for me right now and I need to pivot. That is totally a possibility. So thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me in this video, talking about your process. I'm excited to see what 2024 brings for each of you. Hopefully I'll find some reason to bring you back on the channel so that you can tell everyone like, hey, here's what's going on now, because I think that would be fun. But thank you so much, all three of you. And I look forward to future videos with each of you. Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Viewers, stay tuned for more videos. We'll see you next time.